Thank you so much, Donna. And yes, such a delight to be here together with all of you. And, a very timely time to be talking about herbal medicine as we're starting to feel the little stirrings of spring poking up and a little bit of that winter thaw moving through. So, a lot of us are thinking forward to our time outside, our time in gardens, our time out on the land. And, this is just a really perfect time to start bringing to mind, the ways that we want to connect with the land and each other. So I'm just really quite a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I just want to start out by saying, this emphasis on the people's medicine. And this is something that I think a group such as yourself would really understand, being so community led and collaborative, and really going through the work to discern and understand and connect with the history that is alive with us here today. And I really feel that herbal medicine has such a complementary quality to that inclination, right? We can often think that, working with plants and working with herbs is something kind of far away. And, maybe for some of us, a little hard to connect to, though there might be a lot of inspiration and desire. And really, the goal and the focus of this program is to really just create a little bit of a trace through time to help us to remember our connections to the more than human world, remember our connections to plant medicine, and really help to highlight the fact that this medicine has been with us through all of our human history and continues to be so. So we'll have time at the end for questions. I'll do my very best to make sure that there's enough time for that. Because all of this is so very rich. And then, we'll have a chance to explore this further together. So without further ado, this frame of our time is really starting with the deep time. So, thinking of ourselves not just in our recent history, but really over the stretch into realms that we can only really imagine and we can only really vision. And, we're thinking way, 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 way back in time, right? So we're thinking back to the time where land plants were just evolving on Earth. This is 700 million years ago. It's a number so vast that, it's hard for our minds to even wrap itself around what that means. But if we kind of just look at some really, really basic numbers, starting with 700 million years as an estimate, and looking at hominids, our ancient ancestors, they're on the scene around 6 million years ago. So just even looking at that discrepancy in time and really taking a moment to reflect and think about and feel in ourselves, the impact of, what would it mean for our relationship to plants and the land to be able to connect with these plants as our ancestors? And then even going further, so modern humans, only 300,000 years, give or take, on the scene. So, if we really think about just all of our human evolution, all of that progression over time, it's only like a pretty small fraction of time that, we've been in a place where, working with plants and working with land, has not been our primary method of health and well-being and connection. So, I really just want to highlight that, plants and, their medicinal applications, they evolved alongside us humans and really due to and the response of, our unique needs at any given place and time. And, one thing that we'll see also threaded throughout our, different forays into, cultural applications of medicinal plants is that, they're the understanding that kinship, relationality, some might call that a more spiritual inclination. There's many different ways to think about and conceive and experience that relationship with the more than human world. But this was very deeply interwoven into our medicine. So, the understanding that in order for us to be well and be in a state of balance and vitality, we had to really look beyond the I, me, and mine and open up to and open out to the forces, that we are in relationship with, both to land and our community, to place. So this too is very much embedded in the understanding of medicine over the centuries, and it's one that I think is resurging today, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But in order to, really, get a sense of, how do we start thinking about, the role of herbal medicine and transmission and, how that knowledge was transferred from, person to person over such a vast span of time, we have to start with the understanding that, written records don't encompass the whole of this knowledge, and they're really this small window that we have into what has survived to this day. So, what we have in physical form, gives us a little bit of a window, and in some cases, a very comprehensive window into, the sum total of accumulated knowledge that has been passed on orally from person to person through generations. And many of these herbs that we can identify from these more ancient records are familiar and still with us today. And you'll see throughout my slides there will be little representations of different plants. So here you might recognize a few, such as garlic or juniper or aloe. Some of these are quite familiar to us, either as culinary herbs or medicinal herbs. But the connection to what people were using in ancient times is not so far away, again, from how we use them today. In some cases there's quite a deviation, but I think it's important to recognize that there's a reason that these plants have persisted with us and continue to support us today. And so, the oldest written evidence we have of medicinal plants usage for preparation of different formulations has been found on a Sumerian clay tablet. And, this is approximately dated at 5,000 years old. So again, if we just even look back at that, 300,000 number of, modern humans, so to speak. So, how much time had persisted before, the technology of recording information, right? So, this particular resource, it, has references over 250 various plants, some of them that we might be familiar with today, such as poppy, or, some of the more, potent medicinal plants that aren't part of our materia medica so much today, but we're very much a part of conventional preparations then, such as henbane and mandrake, right? So, we have this rich repository of knowledge that, not only speaks to the different plants that were used, but goes very into detail about the types of preparations and the formulations and how the herbs are working together with different conditions. So, this is a key cornerstone in the evolution of medicinal knowledge that expands far beyond just one region. And we'll look ahead a little bit to see how all of those different pieces intersect. So moving forward to ancient Egypt, which again is one of our most extraordinary ancient repositories of medicinal knowledge. We have the Ebers Papyrus. So this was discovered at around, or this was dated to have been written at around 1550 BC. And this is understood as one of the most extensive and best preserved records of ancient Egyptian medicine known. And again, in this document, we have hundreds of prescriptions and addressing things all the way from a crocodile bite to toenail pain, right? So again, like speaking to the concerns of the people, the day-to-day things that we are all navigating that people are looking for support for and looking to their environment for solutions to these maladies. Some of the plants that, again, you might be familiar with that are referenced here in this document. We have pomegranate, we have aloe, garlic, onion, fig, willow, coriander, juniper. So again, a lot of familiar plant allies that, again, were the mainstay of people's medicine back in those times. And I am only speaking from the perspective of herbal medicine, but, we have to understand in these different documents and traditions that I'm referencing, these are entire medical systems. So, these are encompassing, vastly different technologies of how people worked and understood the human body, its relationship to well-being, imbalance, disease, but again, also the forces around it. So that wide widening out view into, the more than human as well. And, one thing I want to sort of call up in this conversation, which I think really connects forward in time to where we are in our herbal resurgence today, is understanding the different ways that we can look at the systems of our body and their role on our health and well-being, both physically and emotionally. So, for example, in the Ebers Papyrus, they were understood to have a very comprehensive understanding at the time of the circulatory system, the network of blood vessels, the heart's function as the center of blood supply, right? So, they understood it at a very, strong level, even in these ancient times without the modern technologies that we have today to understand the body. But, in addition to the physiological aspects, they also had an understanding of the heart and mind. So the view that, we don't just have the physical organ of the heart, but that the heart as an energetic entity, it influences, how we feel in the world and how we show up in our relationship to emotional health and well-being. And of course, the understanding and the language for that at that time would be very different than the way we're speaking of it today. But I think that this is something that, herbalism, in the 21st century today is really benefiting so deeply from being able to draw from these various herbal traditions that have, persisted over time or have left us clues over time to understand the role of the body and the heart and the mind in a much more expanded way. So, our emotions don't just live up in the head. Our thoughts aren't, the only, defining factor of, how we understand our emotional well-being. And so this is something that, these various medical traditions speak to very eloquently and richly in different ways. And, we can move forward to different systems that, we are still familiar with today and are thriving in their cultures of origin, such as Ayurveda. So, several important Ayurvedic texts were written down starting at around 400 BCE. And again, you have to understand that this is coming off of, centuries of oral transmission. So this is finally getting to a point in time where it's being able to be, cataloged and categorized and shared in a writing technology. And so, the Chakra Samhita, which is one of these ancient texts, mentions over 300 different herbs. And, in addition to the herbs and, of course, a whole spectrum of other medical knowledge, it's also speaking to the different qualities of herbs, such as taste, appearance, digestive effects, their safety, their efficacy, their dosage, their benefits, right? So, again, this is another link to our, contemporary understanding of herbalism, is that as herbalists, we're looking at all of those things too. So, there's such a rich spectrum of ways in which to understand the functions of herbs and how we relate to them through our senses. And so, being able to continue to learn from and expand on these rich traditions that have carried forward those standards of diagnostics and sensing and ways of understanding the effects of herbal medicines. This is something that lives on through us, in our bodies. And, we have such a great capacity to be able to connect with that in real time today. Another herbal tradition that, again, is alive and thriving is, traditional Chinese medicine. And we have a really interesting story here connected to the origin of their first materia medica. Which was, fabled to be created by an emperor that, has a very, he has a very mystical association, right? Was he a god? Was he a human? Was he somewhere in between? It's hard to know. But what we do know is that because of this mythical emperor, who is referred to as the divine farmer or the divine husbandman, because it was said that he had come from farming origins, right? So he is said to have composed this Chinese materia medica circa 2500 BC. So this is way, way, way back in the day. But, you know, again, through oral transmission, through the carrying forward of that knowledge, we see people, beginning to compile these oral histories and traditions into text between 206 BCE and 220 CE. So, we have quite a span of time where this knowledge is being consolidated and integrated into a writing form, and really demonstrating the power and the potency of this information that had been transmitted over centuries. Something you'll see here a picture of him, and he's chewing intently on an herb, and this was one of the aspects of his practice that is often spoken to in the different mythologies and stories of his time, is that he learned the properties of these herbs by tasting. So he was out on the mountain and sampling things and tasting things and writing down his observations, and coming up with a whole category of medicine based on these tactile, sensory, direct observations. And so we'll again go on to see that many of the herbs that are spoken to, in this materia medica, that are still alive today and are still being used and still, completely integrated into modern medicine. We see herbs such as ginseng, licorice, reishi, ginger, cinnamon bark, dong quai. So again, you might have an herbal supplement at home, like a multi-supplement or a vitamin or something, and or you might, have a little bit of ginger tea sometimes, or put a little cinnamon in your tea or whatever, what have you. So the way that herbs fit into our lives and live in our lives currently are often, if we take a kind of a step back and look around, we'll see they're kind of everywhere. Even if we don't think that we're an herbalist, or we don't know much about herbs, but there's actually so much that is just a part of our daily lives that, if we take a closer look, we're often likely to find those traces. And another just extraordinary science of healing is Soa Rigpa, which is traditional Tibetan medicine. And so the roots of traditional Tibetan medicine are, coming from so many different sources. They have the best of Ayurveda, the best of traditional Chinese medicine. They're drawing from their own ancient indigenous wisdom, the ancient bone tradition that was pre-Buddhist in Tibet. And so, they're integrating Greek and Persian medicine. So, one thing that I think, traditional Tibetan medicine really exemplifies and is really inherent, I think, in all of our medicine traditions, is that it comes through exchange, and it comes through interplay and collaboration and sharing of knowledge and integration of knowledge. And we just really see over the history of plant-based medicine and medicine in general, just what a rich and expansive uh, practice has come from the exchange of ideas. And so, again, I'm with a bunch of people who delight in history, and so it's I'm speaking to the crowd here, but I think it's such a wonderful understanding to have that the history and what we have, like what we have today in terms of our different practices and our livelihoods and our life circumstances, they come from such a rich interplay of different forces that have converged and come apart and influenced each other over time. And so this just rich exchange of ideas and influences is something that will just continue to be a theme in the history of medicine, people sharing and exchanging and learning from one another. And one thing I will also say is that this understanding of not just the herbs themselves, but diagnostics. I had spoken to that a little bit before, but we're also looking at not just the plants themselves, but we're looking at how do the plants interface with this rich and multifaceted human instrument that we have, this body, right? So we have these incredibly complex and multifaceted and nuanced bodies on a complex and nuanced and multifaceted earth. And so there's so many different ways that we can utilize our own senses and our own observations to be able to, decode a little bit of that mystery to understand, how we can best pair, these plants with such rich and diverse actions with rich and diverse bodies. And so, common to all of these different traditions that I've spoken to, we have diagnostics such as, physical observation. So, looking at the person very closely in all of the different ways that, their body is configured and the luster of their eyes and their skin and, their overall mannerisms, the shapes of the, different aspects of their face, tongue diagnosis. Pulse reading is another diagnostic tool that, again, is common to all of these different traditions, but manifested in very different ways. So that's another really fascinating piece as well, is that, the Chinese tradition on pulse reading and the Ayurvedic tradition on pulse reading and the traditional Tibetan technique of pulse reading, they're all different systems, but they're all interrelated as well. And they all lead us towards, a very nuanced view of what's going on. So, it's really helpful to kind of widen this out from a more sort of limited way of viewing dis-ease into, I think, a really rich territory of possibilities and ways of knowing that could help move us towards, an appropriate protocol to, be able to regain a state of balance. Another thing that these medicine traditions all have in common is, looking at both their nutritional aspects and lifestyle aspects. And so, there's yes, herbal medicine, but we're also looking at the food that we're taking in as medicine, and we're looking at the quality of our lives and our relationships and the movement and rest and, all of the parts that make life meaningful, and, that's another part about, traditional systems of medicine that, I think I think can be so expansive and healing for a lot of people that have become a little disillusioned with more, conventional, modernized structures of medicine. And not to say that, conventional medicine has, such benefits and is so helpful to so many people. And yet there are all these other areas of medicinal knowledge that I think really make the difference in some cases between people's ability to, be to move into a more optimal vital state of being. And so, as I mentioned before, we also have external therapies, so massage and acupuncture, moxibustion, cupping, many, and this is just to name a very few. Um, so such an expansive way of both integrating the internal and the external therapies. And then, of course, in many cases, as I mentioned, a spiritual component. So really connecting us with the, the gnosis of the more than human, the, the ineffable and the ethereal aspects of our experience here as human beings. So, again, so much richness here that, is very fortunate to have been carried through in so many different traditions. And again, this is only to name just like a small smidgen of examples, because really every culture, every tradition has had its own medical tradition that has manifested in, extraordinarily diverse ways. So, where to speak to this is just really speaking to human history. And so that's a much longer presentation. So moving forward to, the roots of Western herbal medicine. So what we consider to be traditional European medicine and medicine in North America. So, as I mentioned here, again, herbal medicine, not separate from other medical traditions. So at the time, this was really the primary form of medicine along with all of these other therapies. So we are looking back at the period of time where classical Greece was in a period of developing a system based on plant and physical qualities. So again, sort of speaking to what is referred to, again, today and also traditionally as a system of energetics. So this is a way of understanding both the qualities of the human body and the qualities of the plants in terms of their characteristics. And so in classical Greece, they started to devise a system of energetics that would categorize herbs based on qualities of heat, of cold, of moistness or dryness. Similarly, with the body, those same characteristics and also tension, relaxation. So looking at these different states of the tissues, and in classical Greece, these were referred to as the humors. And, there are many different ways in which this was expressed. But over time, as this continued to evolve, there are many bright thinkers that were starting to incorporate different perspectives into, how do we start to look at and make a system that creates patterns between what we're seeing. So, as different physicians are, interacting with their patients, with somebody with some kind of ailment, right? This is how a system of energetics starts to evolve, is that, we meet with clients and we see patterns and we see things enough to where we can start making certain classifications to say, oh, okay, there's certain types of people that tend to run a little hot. Like they're going to be the person outside on a 20-degree day in a t-shirt. And there are some people that no matter how many blankets they wrap themselves up in, even in the heat of summer, they're still always going to be cold, right? We all know those kind of people, right? So, when we're talking about energetics, like this is what we're talking about, these patterns that we see over time manifest in different people, both on a big picture sense, but also even more discreetly in like different parts of the body, right? So you can have like heat in the heart, but cold stomach, and many different ways to parse that out. So, again, in the Greek were incredibly influenced by the medicine that was coming from from China and from India and many other places at that time, right? And so this is what helped them being informed by these different systems to develop their own. One of the folks that we'll see that, again, there's ever so many, so it's really like hard to pick like who to highlight here, but Hippocrates is one of the forerunners in classical Greek medicine that really started to classify and outline and systematize some of these ways of thinking. And in his work, he classified over 300 different types of medicinal plants by their effects, and started to really group them together in terms of their purpose. So, plants for fevers, narcotics, diuretics, digestives, etc. But what's interesting about this moment in time, not just with Hippocrates, but just in this general transition, is that we're starting to see medicine slowly is moving away from what is referred to as maybe superstition or maybe religious overtones or even spiritual overtones to more empirical methods. But again, these aspects still remained, but this is when we're kind of just starting to see that shift into a different way of relating and engaging and thinking about the nature of disease. And so, as we start to move from into a more medieval development of medicine, so we have another person in this story that is referred to as the father of pharmacognosy, which is the study of the physical, chemical, biochemical, and biological properties of plants and other substances, is Dioscorides. And so between 50 and 77 AD, he wrote a text that became incredibly influential, referred to as De Materia Medica. And this is documenting 657 different plant remedies, just about. So again, I mean, this is a massive compendium of knowledge. And again, coming from, so many different sources and an accumulated integration of knowledge, both domestically and from cultures outside of classical Greece, and from the folk remedies and just everyday medicine of the people. So something that we're not going to hear about much at all, when we're talking about the fathers of medicine, or the, sort of like the ones that really made the history headlines, is that so much of this knowledge, again, was sourced from the people. These were people using this medicine and passing these traditions along, and learning what worked and sharing that and continuing that. And so, so much of our collected wealth of knowledge has come from just the traditional people, the average people, the folk people, continuing those traditions along. And for many of these folks, you'll kind of see that back in some in like ancient records, you might see a little note about speaking with the old woman that lived in the corner of the village, that it's like nobody else could cure the disease, but she knew how. And so they were going to those people to find that information. So this is very much integrated as a kind of a silent history in many of these different historical texts over time. And so again, this Materia Medica, was widely read for more than 1,500 years. And then eventually, within the time of the Renaissance, it began to, shift into other different, modes of, sharing this knowledge. New texts and new information started to be compiled. And so, really what this points to is that, for such a significant period of time, this was one of the longest lasting of all, natural history and pharmacological books. So, this played a huge, huge role in the evolution of Western medicine as we know it today. And so classical Islamic medicine was deeply influenced by ancient Greece. And so another fascinating character that we have here is Avicenna, who was alive from 980 to 1037 CE, and he was a philosopher and physician of the Muslim world. And his canon of medicine became a cornerstone text. And this was an encyclopedia of medicine in 5 volumes. And again, this is like the whole of medicinal knowledge at the time, which had so many different technologies and therapies and integrated wisdom from other traditions, subsumed in that. So, again, we're just continuing to see this ever morphing and evolving, sharing and collaborating and exchange of ideas. And so, again, kind of like moving forward, the Salerno school of the 10th century is one of the major European medical centers at the time, and they were translating Arabic texts. And so, again, we were kind of looking at sort of pre-Renaissance and Renaissance times, is that, again, all of these accumulated herbal traditions and medical traditions are coming into new languages and being translated and using to train physicians. And so at this time as well, monasteries really became a center of medicinal knowledge. And so, monks of the time would grow medicinal gardens and use herbs, and really, helped to further that medicinal knowledge, and also, create medicinal gardens that could be of use to the people. And again, all along this time, folk use remains. So the common people are still using their medicine and harvesting their plants and growing their plants as they do. And so this is all continuing on. And, this, as you start to see the evolution of medicine in general, you're seeing things shift from maybe more simple preparations, such as infusions and teas and extracts, are into the Middle Ages onwards, we're looking at more complex compounds. So combining plants with animal and mineral ingredients, and really kind of expanding the scope of how we're bringing all of these different diverse pieces together. And so, between the 15th and 17th centuries, printing is making this also widely available, translating things from Greek and Latin into English, French, Dutch, and Italian. So again, things are moving into all of these new areas and taking root, just as a seed will, you know, sort of float its way to a new piece of land. Medicine is traveling and it's taking root in new places and it's expressing itself based on those unique conditions. And so one person who will be kind of our guide through when we move into the herbal section, talking about specific herbs, is Nicholas Culpeper. And so he is, such a wonderful protagonist in the story of accessible medicine for the people. And so Nicholas Culpeper, he cataloged hundreds of medicinal herbs found outdoors. And, he was really quite a critic of his time, of the contemporary medical methods. And a quote from him, he goes on to say, this not being pleasing and less profitable to me, I consulted with my two brothers, Dr. Reason and Dr. Experience, and took a voyage to visit my mother, Nature, and by whose advice, together with the help of Dr. Diligence, I at last obtained my desire, and being warned by Mr. Honesty, a stranger in our days, to publish it to the world, I have done it. So you can see a little bit of that character in his words that live on with us today. And one of the ways in which he did this was, he published a lot of medical texts into everyday English that were in Latin. And he deliberately sold his main work, The English Physician, at really low, accessible prices for the common people. And he believed that medicine should be public knowledge and not a commercial secret. And he viewed Latin terminology as a way to keep people powerless and separate from that knowledge. And so this book has remained continuously in print since the 17th century. And, being such an advocate for affordable, accessible healthcare for nature's remedies, he faced accusations of witchcraft during the English Civil War and was tried twice. So, we're not even getting into that whole aspect of the story, which I think has an immense bearing on our relationship to herbal remedies and traditional knowledge today. But, we see this as part of a theme and a history that, there's always been a dynamic of power, and who has the knowledge has the power, and especially when it comes to that of the health and well-beings of our bodies, it's an incredible thing that he was able to do to really emphasize the folk access for the people. And again, this is something that I think is so wonderful about our herbal traditions today, is that there is so much knowledge widely available, really accessible ways for people to get involved and remember that innate connection that we all share. And so, moving into North America, so we have a great indebtedness to our indigenous inhabitants of this land. And so, over centuries, the indigenous occupants of North America, which was referred to as Turtle Island by the indigenous peoples here, they had developed an extensive knowledge of native flora and plant-based healing traditions. So again, medicine that had evolved and adapted to their needs on this land of this place. And, there was a lot of exchange between indigenous knowledge and European knowledge as settlers came in contact with them on the land. And, indigenous people really helped settlers address many things such as disease and injury, nutritional deficiencies, complications in childbirth, and really a whole host of maladies. You can imagine what that must have been like coming to a whole new land in this way. They really needed that support. And, North American, early European settlers too brought with them their own rich herbal traditions, cuttings and seeds from, their mother countries. And so, there became not just a mingling of knowledge, but a mingling of the plants themselves as seeds hitched a ride on the boots of folks that came to this land and walked on this earth. And even so much so that, such a common plant that we know today, such as plantain, was referred to as the white man's footsteps because, the seeds are so ubiquitous, they hitched a ride and you see them absolutely everywhere now, right? So, we have not just the knowledge, but we have the plants themselves that are moving and shifting and growing alongside of us. And we can harken back to that first slide about, our original medicine, co-evolving together. This is how it's been. They've moved alongside of us and grown with us. So I think it's really important to recognize in, our herbal medicine traditions today that, they're so deeply informed by the knowledge that was developed by, First Nations ethnobotany, the traditional healing knowledge of enslaved Africans, and, the herb lore from folk herbalists and midwives that often do not get, the same kind of upliftment that many of the big names will get. So, this is all integrated too. This is all part of the substrate. So, we can know that when we're engaging with that knowledge today, that those voices are still alive and with us there through that learning. And so as things continue to develop in North America, by the 19th century, there was quite a vast spread of different medical practices that were present in North America. Many of the heroic medicines at the time, many that Nicholas Culpeper were resisting, were practices such as bloodletting and, extreme purgatives and, toxic metals that were given, such as arsenic and mercury. And, at the time, the eclectics and the physiomedicalists, they're exceptions. They were focused really on the use of botanical remedies and gentle physical therapies. There was a lot of information coming from, from different places in Europe that they were drawing on. So this was really a time of like a really thriving integration of medical knowledge and herbal remedies, and really integrating into a very effective and nuanced practice. But really, we start seeing some shifts there. In the early 19th century, you see the Council on Medical Education and the American Medical Association starting to rise to prominence. And their goal, which I think rightfully so in many ways, because there was kind of the Wild West in terms of medical practice, they wanted to, set standards to, standardize the medical education at the time and, set specific methods of operation. So it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it ended up really shutting out those who couldn't comply with specific standards. And that ended up, ousting a lot of different practices, from homeopathy to chiropractic to osteopathic medicine, and the eclectics using herbal medicine. So they were able to coexist for a while, but there was always a lot of competition. And, schools offering training in any of these disciplines were forced to drop these courses from their curricula or, risk losing accreditation. So moving forward, we're seeing a huge herbal legacy really, unfortunately, come to pass as, different medical standards started to take prominence. And then we start to see in, more recent times, within the last century, we see a lot of these different drugs that have been synthesized from plants start to come onto the scene. So in 1803, morphine is one of the first drugs isolated from a plant. We see in 1820, French pharmacists start isolating quinine from the bark of a genoa tree. We have in 1852, scientists are synthesizing salicin from willow bark. And by 1899, Bayer modified salicin into acetylsalicylic acid, which they called aspirin. So we likely, probably have some of that in our medicine cabinet. So, this really led to, again, just like a very widespread shift in perspective from, working with whole plant constituents to isolated constituents, which, again, they're not the same as a full spectrum herb itself. So, there's so many different interplaying constituents having, different balancing and synergistic effects. And, there's such a lack of scientific research out there to really explore the full potential of many of our traditional herbal remedies that have been with us for centuries. So I know I just said a lot. and there's so much more to say, and I want to make sure we get to the plants and have enough time for questions. So I'm going to move a little fast, but I hope you hang on with me. So I want you to meet some of the plants. So, these are some plants that will, be part of your everyday lives. You may realize it or not. Um, so we have dandelion. So the humble dandelion, with a quote by Nicholas Culpeper, and we'll have quotes from him throughout our slides. And, he talks about dandelion as having an opening and cleansing quality, and therefore very effectual for the obstructions of the liver, gall, and spleen, and the diseases that arise from them, as the jaundice and hypochondriac. And so, this can sound like kind of flourishy, old-timey language, but really he's speaking to the same kinds of uses that we would use dandelion for today. So dandelion is, one of our best spring tonics. We use both the leaf and the root, and it really has such a gentle but effective action on helping to move the liver. And so our livers can be kind of, we can just generally be kind of congested and stuffy after a long winter indoors eating, meat and potatoes and grains and soups and things. And so the power of these spring tonics, they really kind of help get things moving and help get the body to clear things out and have more, just more ease of circulation. And today we use dandelion for many things, such as, skin eruptions or, eczema, psoriasis. If you're having problems with digestion, some people, for example, might have problems with gallbladder, issues eating too much, like too many fats. It's like hard for the body to process. This can be a sign that maybe our livers are a little backed up and need a little bit of help. So in the spring, if you have a patch of dandelion greens or dandelion root, it's a perfect time to harvest the root. All the good stuff is still in there before the leaves come out. Leaves, again, also really lovely as a tea, or you can also have them stir-fried and just part of, like you would have any other stovetop green. And they're just a really lovely way, again, to like get things moving and help, increase that spring vitality. And they're also a very powerful diuretic. It's, I think there's still, I say powerful diuretic in the sense that, if you are on medications that might be diuretics, you might consult with your doctor, kind of keep an eye on that. But again, very gentle, very, easy to integrate. Gentle and effective, I think, is a good way to describe that. So another spring herb that you might know or might see is the stinging nettle. And at the time, they were so well known and well loved that Nicholas Culpeper, in his description of how to identify a nettle, didn't write anything except for nettles are so well known that they need no description, and that they might be found by feeling in the darkest night. So if any of you are a gardener or a hiker and have ever been out and about and encountered a patch of nettles, you'll know what this means. The stinging nettles, they have a bite to them. And so Nicholas Culpeper, he described them as hot and dry. So we talked about those qualities, those energetics, right? And so we can kind of start bringing that in a little bit into our conversation. Nettles, again, they are dryings, and they help when, again, we're coming out of a cold and moist winter. And then nettle tops eaten in the spring, fresh or had in tea, they can help with, as Nicholas Culpeper says, phlegmatic superfluities of the body. So, that just kind of means when we're feeling a little like extra coldness and moistness, and, we need some help kind of getting things moving. He also goes on to say the roots or leaves boiled, or the juice of either of them, can help to open the pipes and passages of the lungs, which is the cause of wheezing and shortness of breath, and help to expectorate tough phlegm and to raise the imposthumed pleurisy. So again, this is we're talking about a plant that, through its drying qualities and its warming qualities, it can help move a more cold, stagnant, damp, mucky condition through the body more effectively. And, again, what he's speaking to, we still refer to today. So, we use nettle for a variety of things. In the spring, we'll use it for blood building as a nutritive tonic. So people who are deficient in minerals and iron, nettles is an incredible ally. It's also used for gout and tissue acidity. So, when we have a lot of extra protein wastes in the blood, nettle can really help as a gentle diuretic to move those out. And it can also be a strengthening tonic for the bones, hair, teeth, and nails and skin. Again, that mineralizing quality can really help restore, replenish, rejuvenate these aspects. And we use all parts of the plant. We use the seeds, the leaves, the root. And so the seeds can be used as a restorative for the kidney. And it helps to, so gently remove toxins from the kidney. And again, by that diuretic effect, same as dandelion, helps us to kind of move anything a little bit stagnant or stale out of the body. Another spring delight that I'm sure many of you know are wild violets. And so we'll see a note from Nicholas says, all the violets are cold and moist while they are fresh and green and are used to cool any heat or distemperature of the body, either inwardly or outwardly, as inflammations in the eyes, in the matrix or fundament, in imposthumes also, and hot swellings. So we can just simplify this and, just look at like what kind of things do we associate with being, hot and inflamed, right? So, a lot of people, for example, can get sick in the transition between winter and spring. We can have like an inflamed, hot cough, a chest with a lot of phlegm. Sometimes that phlegm might be like an icky color, right? So violet is used as a very gentle cough remedy and a very gentle expectorant. So again, being cold and moist, it helps to moisten and soothe like a hot, irritated, inflamed lung condition. But it also has an affinity for the lymph. So again, it's one of those spring plants that is a gentle spring cleanser. It helps with lymph nodes that might be inflamed, arthritis or rheumatic conditions. It has a particular affinity for the head and neck. So if you can think about like ever having like a painful lymph node under your arm or something like that, or hot, scratchy throat, this is a case where you would love to, harvest some violets out of the garden and make a tea. And, this is a wonderful, very gentle, very accessible way to, again, support ourselves through the seasonal transition. Red clover, another one, all in this theme. So thinking about how do our plants sort of offer their gifts to us at the times where we need them most. So again, going into spring when we start to see all of these plants show themselves, red clover, again, is another really potent and gentle, supporter for the lymphatic movement. So, we see here that, an infusion made of boiling water may, with advantage, be used in cases of bronchial and whooping cough. Fomentations and poultices of the herb have been used as local applications to cancerous growths. So again, it's a moving herb. It helps just like get fluids moving, get things moving, get things excreted out of the body that are not life promoting. And again, being a cool and moistening herb, it's helpful in cases of hot, agitated states, particularly of the bronchial and, and upper body. And it's also used to treat inflammation. So, it has been used historically as a poultice to treat inflammation both on the body and on the eyes for like hot, irritated, sort of red, crusty eyes. It's been used in the past, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest using it this way, but it has been said that it's used also as a poultice to treat an adder bite. So, I could surmise why that might be the case, but again, it's kind of looking at like something kind of like inflamed and needing to like help being moved. And even today, you know, red clover is often used as an adjunct in cancer protocols to really just like help the body to be able to dissolve masses, to clear things out of the body, to break down things that have been kind of like stuck and hardened and inflamed. So red clover is again another one of our excellent spring tonics for that. We have calendula. Calendula strengthens the heart exceedingly. The flowers, either green or dried, are much used in possets, broths, and drink as a comforter of the heart and spirits and to expel any malignant or pestilent quality which might annoy them. And so, you know, we use it today as an antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, again, lymphatic herb, really helps get things moving. As a vulnerary, so really soothing for wounds. One that you can totally grow in your garden so easily. It's a beautiful plant to have out on a pot or, you know, a garden bed. And again, really effective for skin inflammations, eczema, ulcers, acne, infections, anything that's sort of like pussy and gross and hot and agitated. And the eclectic physicians would use this very regularly post-surgery to prevent tetanus and gangrene. So both speaks to its vulnerary wound healing quality, but also its antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory quality as well. So again, so many properties that could be spoken to here. Cleavers, again, another awesome spring green. You'll probably feel it sticking to your pants as you're hiking through brush. Another purifier of the blood. And again, we're seeing that theme. The plants we need the most are available and harvestable at the time that we need them. So, you know, it's coming up, you know, fresh in the spring. Oh, sorry. I'm just, my window here is, okay. Yeah, coming up fresh in the spring. A good remedy being eaten, first chopped small and boiled well in water gruel to cleanse the blood and strengthen the liver, and thereby to keep the body in health, and fitting it for that change of season that is coming. And last but not least, lemon balm causes the mind and heart to become merry and reviveth the heart, faintings and swoonings, especially of such who are overtaken in sleep, and driveth away all troublesome cares and thoughts out of the mind, arising from melancholy or black choler. It is very good to help digestion and open obstructions of the brain, and hath so much purging quality in it, says Avenchen, as to expel those melancholy vapors from the spirits and blood which are in the heart and arteries. So I will just go on to say, as a contemporary herbalist, these are all things that we would deeply appreciate lemon balm for today, as a digestive, as a nervine, brings so much brightness and gladness to the heart. So many virtues to say of this herb. But I know we are just about the end of time, and I want to see if we can squeak in a question or two. So with that, I will say thank you so much for your kind attention. And I love answering questions. So if there's anything that came up that we don't get a chance to talk to you about today, please email me. I love to talk about herbs any day. So we'd be happy to, to speak with you more. And you can also learn more about my clinical herbal practice and holistic health practice on my website, and learn more about some of the things that I'm up to. So thank you again for your kind attention, and such a delight to share this with you all. So thank you.